Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'll kick it off here. I was watching one of the last episodes of News Treason over there on Rumble with Dave and another guest of his, and he was talking with Derek Johnson. Now, I've criticized Derek Johnson in the past for a number of things, of course, his tone and the way that he talks to people. However, when it comes to the executive orders and the abnormal things, of course, that are taking place, and of course, how everything that's happening is, again, a special operations operation, so to speak, that there's absolutely no doubt that particular things are happening in a particular way that are highly unusual and not necessarily in a bad way. Although, again, there are questionable things taking place, as I mentioned, of course, in the last episode with the data centers going up everywhere. It seems a bit strange. And again, could have very long-term negative ramifications along with some short-term ones as well. However, he did bring up a particular point which I think is something that people should take into consideration. Just because we're seeing a particular thing on television, as we already know, it doesn't mean that it's real. However, given the fact that many questions are being asked and many stories are being told in a particular direction, and of course the news media is panicking the way that they are, it begs the question, is some of that scripted as well? Because again, based on wartime powers, the media themselves would be controlled by the military. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would all of a sudden all agree on the exact same issue at the exact same time. Maybe they are being controlled in an effort, again, to wake people up slowly over the course of time, instead of lulling people to sleep and brainwashing them over the course of time, which of course is the exact opposite. So there's that particular aspect, I think, that has to be taken into consideration and people should certainly think about. The other aspect, of course, which is one that's been mentioned here along with endless other shows, is that the executive orders that were originally signed by Donald Trump during his first administration were carried over by Joe Biden in his so-called fake administration. That, too, would almost indicate, again, that the military was in charge, and that everybody, again, was being forced to see how bad the left could actually be. How far left could they actually go? What measures could they actually engage in against the American people to, again, permanently, I would say, unbrainwash the masses, let alone galvanize those of us who are awake, and then motivate us, of course, to do all of the things that we've done this entire time, regardless of when a person has woken up or they haven't. Another aspect of this, too, is that some of these operations have been ongoing for quite some time, and they specifically brought up the business of Venezuela and the drug cartels and going after them. And again, I mentioned this on the show, too, a while back, but certainly in 2020, when the whole COVID lie hit, one of the things that happened during one of those task force meetings is it was actually a military meeting where Mark Milley came out, General Mark Milley, of course, at the time, came out, and he said that we're going after the drug cartels. Again, that was essentially kind of the first time that we'd ever really heard anything like that, certainly on a grand scale. So again, we're still under emergency orders. Donald Trump is theoretically, again, a wartime president, not even theoretically, legally he is, which again means that the amount of powers that he has at his availability and his disposal are massive. So just because we see a particular boat getting bombed, that of course has drug dealers on it, drugs, and they're drug running, and that footage has been unclassified, doesn't necessarily mean that it happened yesterday, this week, or even this month, or even this year. Again, we're told, generally speaking, where those boats are and where they're traveling and whatever else, but there's no details beyond us watching an explosion. So the point is that it's quite possible that these geographic areas where there are endless enemies, or certainly where the enemy used to exist, there are actually good guys there controlling things in a particular way and have had it under control in a particular way to, again, slowly disseminate the truth out to everybody on a worldwide scale. But the timeline is off. Again, if it's special operations, you wouldn't be engaging in an actual operation in real time and then having the American public look at it as if it's in real time with it actually being in real time. You would tell the American public probably after it's already happened. That, of course, is different from previous operations that have taken place, certainly again with past fake administrations and illegal administrations at that. So again, me personally, I have no doubt that there are serious operations taking place, that there's absolutely no way that what is being shown on television is the full and complete truthful story in real time. And that, frankly, it has to be that way, because this has to be years, if not decades, in the planning. Again, it's inevitable that there would be massive amounts of good guys looking at what the bad guys have done this entire time, without both sides being compromised, even though in the past they certainly have. But again, there would have to be that third fraction of individuals who are not compromised, who cannot be bought, have no problem taking money, of course, and then saying a couple of pleasantries and engaging in a few pleasantries, and then, of course, doing it, whatever it is that they would like to do because they have the legal right to do so. But then, of course, again, understanding that some of this has to remain classified. But then again, once it actually happens, you wait a little while and a period of time, and then you tell the American public what you have planned and what you're actually doing when, in fact, you've already done it. Again, I personally have no doubt that that's actually happening, because you would want the element of surprise, but you would also want the back end effect, which is not just the element of surprise, but the ability to take what has actually already taken place and slowly disseminate it and sprinkle it across the American public to slowly wake them up so that they know what leadership looks like and they know what is actually happening and how it's a good thing. Again, we could spend an entire show and multiple shows, as endless people have, and countless hours on all of the anomalies and the irregular optics, certainly, of a number of different things that have taken place, certainly since 2015, 2016. I mean, we would be here all day and into future days if we were discussing all of the anomalies that took place. But if you take 2020 into consideration, I have no doubt that this is going to be unraveled for the American public to see the actual voter fraud that was taking place, because you can use all of that as a catalyst for, again, eliminating the machines themselves, and then, of course, creating paper ballots and one-day voting, single-day voting, along with voter ID. This, again, would have to be something that takes place in our country. It would have to be something that takes place nationwide and in real time during that election of 2020, in my opinion, again, based on everything that was documented back then. I was even documenting it back then and put it in Volume 9 of the Storm books. You're welcome to check those out for free on my website. Either way, all of that, in my opinion, was a military operation that was being done to, again, catch all of the individuals participating in that act. Dominion, the people behind Dominion, Smartmatic, the people behind them, foreign agents, foreign countries, domestic enemies, you name it. That entire thing, in my opinion, was a giant RICO sting operation, which means there's no way that they would take all of that information that they gathered in real time with all of the proof that they have, which Donald Trump has even said again, he caught them all, he has all the information. There's no way that they would do that and then not use it to their benefit and to our country's benefit. They would have to. So again, just wanted to mention that kind of right off the top. Just because you see something again being discussed as if it just happened in the mainstream media or among the talking heads on TV doesn't mean that it just happened. It's quite possible it happened weeks, months, if not years previous. We're just finding out now. Now, there was this particular post on X from a Shanaka and Anselm Herrera. I'm saying that correctly, probably not. But this is an interesting post, and it was a breakdown, again, having to do with trade, the economy, and the deals that are being made, certainly when it comes to Malaysia, Japan, Thailand, and then, of course, China here in the future. The other thing to keep in mind too, and I've said this before, is that these deals, although they look economic at face value, there's no way that they are solely economic from just a trade standpoint. There have to be endless other deals that are being made, again, beyond military equipment and XYZ. These countries have to be agreeing to do whatever they can do to, again, get rid of child trafficking, human trafficking, hopefully some Jewish influence that exists in some of these countries, eliminating some of these banks. Again, the waste, fraud, and abuse, you name it. I mean, some of this has to be woven into these deals that are being signed, you would think. At least you would hope, anyway. Time will tell on a lot of that, but who knows? Either way, here was their post, and it said the following: October 26th, 2025, the day America became an empire. They said the following, quote, "While you watch TikTok, the United States just executed the greatest economic coup in human history. China controls 80% of rare earth processing, the neurons of every weapon system, smartphone, and AI server on planet Earth. One element, neodymium, if I'm saying that right. Without it, F-35s don't fly, Teslas don't move, data centers go dark." Well, again, F-35s have been criticized, Teslas are trash, and data centers are highly questionable. So, not sure that that's the greatest comparison, but either way, it goes on. It says Trump threatened to destroy $300 billion in Chinese exports with 100% tariffs. Beijing responded by threatening to choke the global technology supply chain. Then something impossible happened: the 72-hour checkmate. October 24th, Malaysia signs Mineral Pact. October 25th, Thailand signs Processing Deal. October 26th, Framework announced, China blinks. Hidden in the fine print, 13 billion Australian rare earth processing. Cambodia extraction rights. Japan's 2010 playbook, which cut Chinese dependency 30%, now deployed across $350 billion in American AI infrastructure. The number that ends globalization. U.S.-China trade, $758 billion in 2018, now $578 billion in 2024. That $180 billion didn't vanish. It relocated to nations that bend the knee. ASEAN, trade, up 20%. Chinese rare earth markets share dropping for first time in 30 years. American supply chains rerouting in real time while Beijing realizes the trap. Then they said, here's what they're not telling you. This isn't trade negotiation, it's tribute collection. Trump just converted the world's largest consumer market from a trade partner into a weapon. Every nation now faces a choice: access to American markets or access to Chinese supply chains. Not both, ever again. The $20 million soybean freeze, first since 2018, isn't retaliation, it's a demonstration. China can't inflict pain, America can inflict extinction. The pattern, then, that broke reality. They said 17 times, interesting number, since 2018, identical playbook, announce apocalyptic tariffs. Markets crater, China retaliates, then exemptions appear for allies. Pressure multiplies on Beijing. 63% of Chinese goods face maximum tariffs. Allied nations, only 4%. Every chaotic quote-unquote threat was a calculated bid. Every impulsive quote-unquote tweet moved supply chains. Every trade war quote-unquote headline masked the systematic dismantling of Chinese technology sovereignty. What happens next? November 1, Xi meets Trump at APEC. The deal is already done. Rare earth access for tariff relief. American boots on Asian rare earth facilities. China gets to save face. America gets the future. Taiwan, AI dominance, technology independence, and the end of competitive multipolarity, all bundled into a quote-unquote trade framework the media will call a truce. The truth, globalization didn't collapse, it was conquered, unquote. Now let me read one reply to this, and then the original poster's reply to that reply, and then one more explanation which accompanies this also, which I think might make it even more simple. Again, the overall umbrella here is that it's not just about quote unquote tariffs or trade. It's about far more than that, and certainly in the long term, I think. So again, I'm going to throw this out there just as speculation before I read these follow-up explanations, but what if those quote-unquote data centers end up becoming something that's far more important to our nation as a whole? That it's not just servers with information, but it ends up being, again, manufacturing plants. That instead of particular products that have been, again, singularly sold and or made in China are actually made here. While that may not be, again, the face value immediate impact of those places, who's to say that they can't be transformed into that and actually made by Americans here in the future? It's quite possible. Of course, it would take training, and we fully understand that. But if that's the idea, is to strip essentially the foundation of much of the technology that we use on a day in and day out basis away from China and start making it right here in our own country, why is that a bad thing? So again, here's a follow-up response to this. This was from a Janice the Watcher, and they said, America didn't end globalization, it privatized it. The empire model is now subscription-based. Pay with loyalty or lose access. The question isn't who wins, but who escapes the system first. What happens when the market becomes a weapon? The original poster replied and said the following. Globalization didn't die, it got a paywall. Receipt number 1. Access now depends on permissions, not prices. Dollar clearing, SWIFT pipes, SWIFT pipes, and export licenses are switches Washington can flip. Ask any firm on the U.S. entity list or a bank that touched a secondary sanction. Receipt number 2. Chips proved the model. 2022 through 2025 controlled barred EUV to China and roped in ASML, TSMC, Samsung, NVIDIA. Join the rule set or lose the market. That's subscription geopolitics. They said receipt number 3, supply chains are voting with their feet. China plus one turned into China plus many. Vietnam, India, Mexico, ASEAN pulled record FDI, while U.S. tariffs and tech bans stayed. Globalization didn't collapse, it rerouted through members-only corridors. Receipt number 4, critical minerals are being repathed. China still processes the bulk of rare earths, but U.S., Australia, Japan projects, Linus, Texas, DoD contracts, allied pacts are building a non-China spine. Inputs become leverage, leverage becomes policy. Receipt number 5, markets are now instruments. When access is conditional, price is policy enforcement. The free market, quote unquote, is a gated API. They said, conclusion, America didn't end globalization, it privatized it. The empire runs on logins, licenses, and loyalties. The real game isn't who wins, quote unquote, it's who can exit the system without going dark. Strategy question, when the market itself is a weapon, do you hold assets and infrastructure that still work after the switch is flipped? And then a Michael Greco basically asked Grok, the AI system, please explain this like I'm a dummy. And here's what Grok said, in summary. America's big market is like the world's biggest playground. China controls any ingredients, rare earths, for phones, jets, and AI, but the U.S. used tariffs like super high entry fees to scare companies away. Now, friends like Malaysia, Thailand, and Australia are sharing those ingredients with America instead, building new paths that skip China. Globalization isn't dead. It's now a VIP club where loyalty to the U.S. gets you in or you get left out, unquote. There's one more response here from a Noah Christopher, and they said the following: this is genius geopolitics. Trump didn't just make a deal, he flipped the global supply chain. He moved rare earth control from China to U.S. allies like Malaysia and Australia. He secured America's technological future, rather. That's not chaos, it's strategy. While others talk climate, Trump builds economic empires that guarantee strength, independence, and unmatched leverage nationwide, unquote. I can't disagree with any of that. I just can't. For the simple fact that it's too complex. And this is something that's been going on behind the scenes for far too long. Certainly, again, without the help of Obama, certainly, again, without the help of Joe Biden, and certainly not with the help of anybody on the left, let alone any local or state politicians. These people have no idea what the hell is going on. There is a shadow government behind Donald Trump that again, has been operating multidimensionally, certainly from a military standpoint, an economic standpoint, a social standpoint, you name it. It's a multidimensional operation, and it's been highly successful. So, again, we're going to have to see where this goes in the future, but things look pretty damn good right now. And this is really, really interesting as far as I'm concerned. So, just wanted to lay that on you. I find it fascinating. Okay, let's dive into education stuff. First of all, there's been a little local incident that's occurred. Rather humorous, rather predictable. Again, you give these people an inch, they'll take a mile. You give them a shovel, they'll dig themselves their own grave. As I've written before, of course, on Substack and certainly spoken about here on the show, there are two individuals running against two other conservatives for 2 seats on the local school board here in Oxford, Ohio. Matt Wyatt and Pat Mead, of course, I've written articles about exposing their hypocrisy, their lies, and their nonsense. And, of course, the individuals holding a great deal of people accountable, specifically Don King, who certainly currently sits on the Talawanda School Board, and then, of course, Corey Fry and Tom Heisler, who are running for the 2 vacant seats as well. So, again, the race is between Corey Fry and Tom Heisler, against basically Pat Mead and Matt Wyatt. And here's what happened just the other day. Now, of course, there have been some mailers that have gone out in people's mailboxes, and the ones that are the most professional and most direct and to the point that actually lay out a serious plan, that has to do, of course, with Corey Fry and Tom Heisler. Their mailers are very professional and very well done. And then you have Pat Mead's little mailer, which wasn't much of a mailer. It was a doorknob hanger thing, where, again, he's basically saying, I've been around since the crust of the earth cooled, and I'm responsible for the temperature outside, so vote for me. And again, he's taking credit for things that he had absolutely nothing to do with, that endless other people actually had something to do with. And then, of course, you have Matt Wyatt, and the two of them have also been on the same mailer, which I published in a previous Substack article, but just the other day, Matt Wyatt decided to send out his own mailer, yet again. So this is at least his second or third mailer all by himself. And here's what he says. On one side of it, which again is put out by the Ohio Democratic Party, based out of Columbus, Ohio, it says at the top, extreme right-wing school board candidate, peeping Tom Heisler, was busted. And then it has 2 pictures of Tom from the security footage that the school district released to the public to then have the public place it on Facebook to smear Tom Heisler in a political stunt. And of course, spin this into a separate issue, which is not true at all. Tom Heisler was taking pictures of all of the gay propaganda that exists on the walls, along with the bulletin boards and the Gleason pamphlets and all that nonsense. But again, Matt Wyatt has now twisted his own storytelling of the incident and now turning this into Tom Heisler is a quote-unquote peeping Tom. At the bottom below these pictures, he writes, Tom Heisler was caught sneaking around THS after hours and taking photos near student bathrooms, and then posted the images online to intimidate our teachers. Heisler violated school policy and made teachers and students feel unsafe and targeted. Keep peeping Tom Heisler away from our school board. And then at the bottom of that, he actually sources the local town newspaper, the Oxford Free Press, which the Oxford Free Press didn't say any of that. So it's not plagiarism per se. He's just lying and then falsely sourcing a local outlet. Not to mention, like I said, Tom Heisler wasn't taking pictures of bathrooms. He was taking pictures of the gay shit that the school teachers put out there and the administration allows to exist there when it's not supposed to exist anywhere now. HB 8, Presidential Executive Order, etc., etc. But what Matt also doesn't understand is that he's proving that he has no problem lying even about things that he's previously lied about and then changing the lie yet again. And there's also this element, which is remarkably specific and incredibly nefarious, is you cannot accuse someone of breaking a law, which being a peeping Tom is in fact a crime in the state of Ohio. There are people in this town who have been arrested for doing that and are now in jail. Again, you're accusing somebody of engaging in a crime. And you're doing so, knowingly doing it, and knowing that it's not true. And then, of course, like I said, putting it out in print form in a mailer for endless people to see to disparage his character, and then, of course, sway votes a particular way in your direction. You can't do any of that. None of that is allowed under Ohio law. And then if you flip over the mailer, it actually says this then. On the right side, it says Tom Heisler and Corey Fry, backed by Don King, to disrupt our schools. And it has a picture of the three of them. And then it says Tom Heisler and Corey Fry are backed by Don King, the school board member who used her district email to break into teachers' Google calendars and access private student IEP information. Number one, every line of that is 100% false. It's 100% false. In fact, the exact opposite is actually what happened. Matt Wyatt voted to release the Surefire report, which I wrote about on Substack and spoke about here on the show. And by releasing that confidential and privileged information, he ended up releasing the IP. It was him alone that released the IP addresses of minors along with other citizens in the area, which are personal identifying markers, and you can't do that. It's a FERPA violation. That's what Matt Wyatt engaged in. Then below that, he writes, King even posted instructions online showing others how to violate student privacy. No, she didn't. I did. And it was already out there for the public to know in the first place. Parents sent it to me, not Don King. And I spoke about that in a board meeting and said it to his face. See, again, here's here's the problem with liars. They can't keep track of the lies because they're so disinterested in the truth. They very delusionally believe whatever it is that they want to believe, and then again have no problem engaging in libelous behavior and slandering individuals on the record when the truth is right in front of their face. But they don't want to accept the fact that they were the ones actually engaging in this behavior in the first place. And then there's one last section here. It says, now King wants Heisler and Fry elected so she'll have the majority to continue disrupting our schools. And then he again sources the Oxford Free Press when the Oxford Free Press never said any of that. He then says this again, the richness in hypocrisy. It's literally on the same side of his mailer. Keep national culture wars out of our schools. Vote no on Heisler and Fry. And then he says, and then it says on the other side, keep Matt Wyatt, putting students first, not politics. But that's exactly what he's doing. He's putting politics first. He's highlighting, again, his own political delusions and his political targeting of people, which, again, is slanderous and libelous and violates Ohio Revised Code, which I'll read through here in just a minute. And then he says, protect students' and teachers' privacy to ensure everyone feels safe at school. Why did you target minors then and parents by releasing their IP addresses? Why did you do that? Why did you vote to do that? He says support programs that prepare our students for success in college, trade school, or directly in the workforce. He's proposed nothing of the sort. And he's been on the board for a year as an interim board member. Then he says work with anyone and everyone to provide an exceptional education for every child in the district. He's never worked alongside Don King, and Don King was duly elected to the board. All he's done is attack her and yell at her. Vote Matt Wyatt for school board. Good luck. Good luck. Again, here's the ironic part. I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about this kind of behavior from the likes of Matt Wyatt and Pat Mead. And we arrived at the same conclusion. You don't have to help these people. And you don't have to say or do anything. It won't matter if you're 6 months out from an election or you're a few days away from an election. These people will literally shoot themselves in the foot all of the time without any assistance. Case in point, due to Matt's mailer going out, with apparently no one even proofreading it or, again, running it by anybody to see if it's even legit, or if he sourced anything correctly, which he clearly didn't, the Oxford Free Press had no choice but to respond to the false mailer and the false sourcing. And here's what they said on Facebook, quote, a recent mailer for Talawanda Board of Education candidate Matt Wyatt shared throughout the school district misrepresented the Oxford's Free Press coverage when citing the publication as a source. The OFP did not report on any of these claims in the March issue cited on the mailer. The OFP reported board member Don King's email was used to access student IEPs without authorization, but it did not say King was the one who accessed the information. The OFP did not report any of the other claims in the mailer. Well, first of all, in that paragraph, there is a lie, or I should say, just a statement that is not factual. It's already been shown that Dawn King accessed the Google Calendar because she has a right as a board member to do so, because it's in any board's policy, regardless of where a person lives, that if you sit on a school board, your position is literal oversight of everything. And if you suspect that there is a technological system that is wide open that should be private, you have no choice but to log in to see if in fact it is wide open. And then make mention of it, of course, to the people. And tell the people, hey, your information is available out there. This needs to be shut down, which is exactly what she did. The problem, again, is that even the Oxford Free Press is getting that wrong. And it was shown to be the case because Dawn King wasn't the only one who accessed the information, which was her right. It was the right of any parent who has a student who attends the district to use their own child's password and login to see if their information was widely available also, and it was. See, that's the flaw in this whole thing, is this was administrative negligence from the superintendent and the tech director and building administrators district-wide a year ago, and many years before a year ago, because their Google Calendars with all the IEP and 504 private information of students has been widely available since, well, forever. Their statement went on here. They said, the October issue cited in the mailer does discuss the district superintendent reaching out to Tom Heisler regarding security footage showing Heisler walking around and taking photos in the halls of Talawanda High School. The Oxford Free Press did not report that bathrooms were the subject of those photos as stated by the mailer. Correct. Because even the person behind the mailer, Matt Wyatt, didn't mention it in his own Facebook post, which I posted in the last Substack article. This is how retarded these people are. They don't even read their own Facebook posts. Remember what they wrote on Facebook in their small brain emotional hysteria. And then they create a mailer that is 100% false, purposely designed to slander the character of human beings, using, again, falsehoods that he's knowingly using to, again, his own whatever, political benefit, so he thinks. The statement went on, they said, quote, the stories sourced in the mailer did not address the additional claims. As a member of the Institute of Nonprofit News, INN, the Oxford Free Press upholds a commitment to nonpartisanship across all aspects of its work. The Free Press does not endorse directly or indirectly any political candidate, party, or ideology. This standard applies to all content and advertising, including opinion pieces, submitted materials, and sponsored content. And then they said both stories sourced in the mailer can be found below, and they have links to both. Again, everybody around here knows that the Oxford Free Press is a communist rag. That's fine, and they get to be. That's no problem. Everybody can see it because they have all of their donors listed on the front page or on the inside of the front page. Anybody can see who gives money to the Oxford Free Press. And the people who live around here who have no problem having their names in a communist rag, all you're doing is telling everybody that you're a left-wing communist and that you have no problem giving at least whatever it is, $230, $250, something like that. Seems like a waste of money, but, that's what a communist does best, is waste cash. So again, it's not that they haven't been critical of Talawanda in the past. They have. But the article's not diving into the real truth. The way that, again, my Substack articles regarding Talawanda exactly dive into specifically, with open records requests, Ohio Revised Code, and law. That right there, again, is what the Oxford Free Press does not do. People would look at my Substack page, of course, and they would say, well, you're partisan also, and you're only interested in your agenda in XYZ. Well, here's the fun part. Not having an affiliation with the school district gives me an advantage. I have no affiliation with it whatsoever. I don't give money to it. I don't attend its events. I don't have children that go there. I'm not married to anybody who goes there. I don't date anybody who goes there. I have zero affiliation with it whatsoever, other than the fact that I used to go there. And I don't have a Talawanda employee who sits on my board of directors, quote unquote, for my Substack publication outlet. Of course, there is no board of directors. I'm the director. That's the point. But Stephanie Arney is an employee of the district in the administrative office, and she sits on the board of directors of that newspaper. That's a conflict of interest. The Oxford Free Press should cut her loose. It's obvious that that's a conflict of interest. And it's already been shown in open records requests, some of which, of course, I've already made and I've already published, that you have the director of communications directly communicating with the newspaper to tell them what to make open records requests about so that we can smear Tom Heisler on Facebook and then later on in a publication. They're all in on it. Now, here again is where Ohio Revised Code comes into play, and here's where they step in a pile of their own shit. Allow me to read some Ohio Revised Code. Again, as I've said before, and as a friend of mine and I were talking, we basically looked at one another and we said, so how long is it going to take for these people to figure out that they might want to ask themselves some legal scenario questions before they publish something? I mean, when are they going to figure out that that's what you're really supposed to do if you want to be thorough and you want to be accurate? But see, they're not interested in thoroughness or accuracy. They're interested in over-emotional, we have to react. Let's do this as fast and as stupid as we possibly can. Nothing terrible will happen. And yet, every single time, something terrible happens to them. Ohio election laws on false statements. Ohio Revised Code subsection 3517.21. Key provisions potentially violated by Matt Wyatt. Interesting. Ohio Revised Code subsection 3517.21b10 prohibits posting, publishing, circulating, distributing, or disseminating a false statement concerning a candidate, knowing it to be false, or with reckless disregard of its falsity, if the statement is designed to promote the election/nomination of one candidate or the defeat of another. Ohio Revised Code subsection 3517.21 section B9 prohibits making, issuing, or disseminating false statements about a candidate's voting record or public statements, knowing they are false or with reckless disregard, what's commonly referred to as reckless disregard for the truth. And then it says other potentially applicable subsections include 3517.21 section B2, which is false statements about a candidate's education, degrees, or training. B4, false claims that a candidate has been indicted or convicted of crimes involving corruption or moral turpitude. Now, that hasn't happened, at least not to my knowledge yet. B2 and B4 haven't occurred yet. B5, statements about indictments or election findings without disclosing outcomes. That hasn't happened yet either. B8, falsely identifying the source of a statement or unauthorized use of another's name/endorsement. That happened. Falsely sourcing the Oxford Free Press twice. Now here's where this becomes criminal. Ohio Revised Code subsection 3599.40. It's a misdemeanor of the first degree with up to 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine, or it becomes a felony of the fifth degree if this is directly tied to other election falsification statutes. Then, of course, there's civil defamation laws, many of them, as a matter of fact. Ohio Revised Code Chapter 2739, Common Law Key Provisions Violated. Potentially in this case, you're talking about libel, which is written defamation, Ohio Revised Code subsection 2739.01 and others. A false written statement publicly to a third party that exposes the candidate to public hatred, contempt, ridicule, or injury in their trade/business. Campaign flyers qualify as libelous publications. Tom Heisler and Don King have a lawsuit against Matt Wyatt. Period. They'll have to prove that they lost money, which can be kind of difficult, but it doesn't mean that a court won't rule in their favor and rule Matt Wyatt as being guilty of this behavior. It simply means then, once they gain that conviction, which they would get, that Matt Wyatt can't speak about these individuals ever again. Again, this is where defamation is interesting in per se cases, and it applies specifically to statements that impute crime, moral turpitude, loathsome disease, or professional incompetence. Common, of course, in political attacks on school board candidates, such as false claims of mismanagement or ethical lapses. But no proof of special damages, for example, lost votes, is needed because harm is presumed. This also, of course, directly impacts actual votes themselves, that if statements are misled or they mislead, rather, the electorate, there are several recourse options, and actions must be filed promptly, as the statute of limitations on these, again, defamation comments or libelous and slanderous comments is 1 year from publication, which is Ohio Revised Code subsection 2305.11. Then there's defamation per se occurs when material is defamatory on its face. Defamation per quad occurs before the public in a false light is subject to liability to the other for invasion of his privacy if a. the false light in which the other was placed would be highly offensive to a reasonable person. I think that's safe to say. Calling somebody a peeping Tom and saying that a female broke into a computer system, which neither happened, and B, the actor had knowledge of or acted in reckless disregard as to the falsity of the publicized matter and the false light in which the other would be placed. Yes, and of course this is Ohio Supreme Court precedent, Welling versus Wenfeld. Falsely accusing a board member of an unauthorized use of a computer is, again, a felony. You're accusing Don King of engaging in a felony. Not to mention, a peeping Tom, and being a peeping Tom is also felonious behavior. So he's falsely accusing two individuals of engaging in illegality. On the record, in written form, being mailed out to thousands and thousands of people. ORC subsection 2913.04 section B is itself a violation of subsection 3517.21b4, which is false crime accusation and libel per se. Now here's again where I'll openly admit this, and I have zero problem doing it. Matt Wyatt has an employer. His employer happens to be the University of Cincinnati and their foundations wing, which means there's an entire wing of the university, like there is in many universities sometimes anyway, where they solely focus on donations and fundraising. And that, of course, is broken up by the different schools of study that exist within said college or university. He's directly affiliated with the foundational wing as their principal giver and their principal giving wing of the College of Arts and Sciences, again at the University of Cincinnati. Now, if you were the University of Cincinnati, and again, I know all these institutions are left-wing communists. I mean, we understand that. However, what's interesting is that their employment and their status, regardless of the position, is all dependent on public image. That if their public image shifts in a negative direction, and that scale tips, what ends up happening, of course, is everybody's on the hook for why that's the case. Why all of a sudden is our public image bad? Why all of a sudden are we not receiving the same kinds of donations that we received in the past? Why is it that the alumni associations aren't providing as much money as they used to? Is it because we're keeping bad people around? Is it because we're hiring and maintaining employees that have serious character flaws? You see, when money is your bottom line, and public image is your bottom line, and you hire people like a Matt Wyatt, who are doing the things that they are doing, again, in their private time, so one would believe, in a separate town, running for school board, not affiliated with the University of Cincinnati, although he is in his employment. Is that who you really want representing you as a principal giving entity or fundraising entity within the College of Arts and Sciences at a university? Some people would say absolutely. The harder left wing, the better. The more he lies and deceives, slanders, and engages in libelous behavior, the better it works out for all of us. Because those are the kinds of people that not only we hire, but those are the kinds of people, again, that we want donating to us. Those people exist who believe that. That is a thing. They do. However, there are people that don't believe that. And there are people, again, who would previously have given to the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Cincinnati who might find out about this information, and then all of a sudden they pull their donations. And then the individuals at the very top, the board of the foundations center and the president and vice president, et cetera, those individuals, of course, find out that Matt Wyatt is engaging in this kind of behavior. That's when they're going to have to pull out their scale. That's when they're going to have to take a weight as to whether or not having a Matt Wyatt around with the behavior that he engages in and has engaged in on the record numerous times and not learning from it is going to be worth it for their university or their college or their fundraising. When does a person like that become a liability? That's a question they're going to have to ask themselves. Because I sent this to all of them. I sent this to those individuals. Now, Matt Wyatt apparently didn't work very long at Miami University, here in town, in their Farmer School of Business, basically doing the same thing and raising funds. I wonder why. Maybe it's because he shouts at Don King in board meetings all of the time, talks down to a woman right to her face on the record. I don't know. I've never contacted Miami University or his previous place of employment. However, given this and this level of uncouth behavior, which I just laid out Ohio Revised Code, it's pretty crystal clear. I figured the people at the University of Cincinnati would want to know about this because this is a problem. This is a serious character flaw. When you work for a large university or a small university or any place for that matter, you represent that entire university or entity, corporation, company, again, regardless of its size, which means your actions directly reflect the entire working environment. And as I've written before on the record again in numerous books, certainly my first book, public image is their bottom line. You'd think it'd be, again, academic success and long-term longitudinal success from the individuals who leave an institution. As far as the foundations are concerned in the fundraising, they want to maintain the university and those schools of study, so to speak. That's their bottom line. Because if they don't, of course, they're out of a job, and then the school of study ends up being eliminated. And then if enough schools of study are eliminated, you can say goodbye to the entire university as a whole. But again, it just begs the question, does a Matt Wyatt and a person with those kinds of behaviors become a liability? I think so, but I don't run the University of Cincinnati. That's not my call to make. Again, employers have a right to know the kinds of people that are working around them and what they're doing. If a person is, again, working at a car dealership and they're selling automobiles, the employers have a right to know that in the evenings, that individual, again, is going to ladies' night bars and hitting on women on a constant basis and being thrown out of said bar. The two activities are separate, yes, but one of those behaviors at one of those times of a separate event in their so-called leisure time is a serious character flaw. Wouldn't the people, again, of a multi-million-dollar dealership or corporation or company want to know about the serious character flaws of one of their own employees, again, in their own spare time? I would think so, because one slides right into the other. A deviant person in their private life or even in their spare time is going to be a deviant person in their professional life, and vice versa. Again, a dishonest person in their private life or in their spare time when working with other individuals and around other individuals is going to be a dishonest person in their professional career. It's not a stretch. It's not a thick dividing line between those two time periods or areas or avenues of thought. It's the same person. It's the same behaviors, same characteristics. It's problematic, and people have a right to know. Okay. Now, with that aside, again, there's still a few days left here before the election next week, and they'll probably screw themselves even harder in the future. So you just sit back and let them do it. They don't need any help from us. I find it absolutely entertaining. This is from Fox News. It says dozens of parents' rights groups call for 50-state audit to rid K12 schools of DEI, quote, clean up the mess, unquote. Defending Education, which is one of these groups' allies, urge governors to review K12 policies they call ideologically driven. It says dozens of parental rights organizations have signed on to a letter sent to all 50 states calling for top to bottom, statewide audits of education laws and policies, warning that DEI, poor hiring practices, and discrimination based on sex and gender continues to be prevalent in K-12 schools nationwide. Yes, they're digging in like ticks because they don't like the executive order, and where the state has already created law about this, like we have in Ohio, with our own parental bill of rights, so to speak, they don't care. Local school districts don't care. They're continuing to violate, again, Title VI, Title VII, Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, or equal protection clauses that undermine student safety with poor vetting and hiring practices. Again, this is common here. So, again, it's only a matter of time before every state starts to get on board, or at least most of these states start to get on board. But where the rubber meets the road and the bullet hits the bone per usual, is it always lies with accountability. I've said it in the last episode, I'll keep saying it. If you don't have accountability, then you just have this back and forth lawfare. Well, what's the law for if you're not going to hold anybody accountable and there isn't going to be swift justice and or punishments, which is the same thing? And then those punishments have to be public. That's what's missing here. That's the only piece that's missing. Here's a state that's implemented this as law. Now here's a superintendent and a school district school board that all got wiped out because they refused to follow the law. That has yet to happen, at least to my knowledge. But therein lies the problem. That's what people wait for. That's what people, again, continue to push for. The real people wanting real social justice are the real people that want judicial justice. If you're going to have a law, enforce it, and then hold the people accountable with what's called a penalty. What's their penalty? They've been charged. Now, what's their sentence? This is the part that is lacking. Case in point, here's another one. And this, again, is, I would say, less affiliated with a school. However, the list of individuals within the school itself or school district itself who probably knew of this kind of behavior was probably far larger than the people who did not. And I played this audio again in the last war video on Monday night, but I'm going to play it here again because it bears repeating. This is from Gateway Pundit, and it was titled Outrageous. Oklahoma teen rapist avoids nearly 80-year sentence after assaulting two girlfriends. Judge grants youthful offender status. Instead of being charged as an adult, they were charged as a minor in a plea agreement, and then all they have to do is basically 150 hours of community service. It's an absolute outrage. Again, this person raped two girls, sexually assaulted them, choked them, almost killed one via strangulation. Sodomized these girls. Here's the audio clip from News Nation on this specifically. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
And while there were even more and way bigger charges that the state likely could have thrown at this kid, like attempted murder, the two alleged victims and their families had every reason to believe that the wheels of justice were hard at work on this case, both for them and for the accused, Jesse Mack Butler. And before I tell you what ended up happening, let me tell you why he faced those specific charges, what he actually did to those two girls. You should know that these details are extremely graphic. They are despicable, but they are critical to this story, especially when you find out how the judge came down in this case. So fair warning, trigger warning, what I'm about to list out for you is very uncomfortable to say and to hear. A police affidavit says a girl who's identified only as LS because she's a minor dated Jesse Butler for about 3 months, starting in January of last year. She was 16 at the time. And during that time, the victim said Butler repeatedly raped and attempted to rape her and would strangle her if she refused. The teenage girl needed surgery to repair the damage done to her neck by the strangulation. And her doctor told her that she would have died had that strangulation lasted another 30 seconds. The girl said that she gave in to Jesse Mack Butler because he threatened to kill her and he threatened to kill her family if she didn't give in. A separate affidavit says in March of last year, Butler took up with another 16-year-old girl identified only as KS. And that relationship lasted 6 months, but this teenager also said that Butler was aggressive and violent with her and says she went along with all the unwanted sex to avoid being hurt further. This victim also said that one time when she did refuse, Butler strangled her too. But get this, he recorded himself strangling her until she passed out. And lest you think this might be just a he said, she said, police later found that video on Jesse Mack Butler's phone. So that's what we call evidence. Jesse Butler pleaded not guilty to everything, as was his right off the bat. But in the coming months, for reasons that I will not pretend tonight to understand, the DA's office struck a deal with Butler's lawyers to change his status from adult to youthful offender. The victim's families begged the DA, please do not do that. Please, no. But in July, a judge decided to sign off on this. And in August, Jesse Mack Butler changed his plea from not guilty to no contest, meaning he knew there was ample evidence to convict him. And you should know that a conviction is the result of a no contest plea, right? That's what you get, convicted. By the way, I mentioned there were 10 counts before, but by August, there was one more. So the grand tally now stood at 11. The new count was for violating a protective order, which, oh my God, facing 10 felony counts and violating a protective order should have been a hell of a red flag for anybody, somebody. But the very same day that happened, Butler was sentenced to 78 years in prison, which sounds like a fitting punishment for somebody who nearly kills 2 teenage girls and rapes them repeatedly with all sorts of things. But as a youthful offender, Jesse Mack Butler was also entitled to special treatment, like a rehabilitation plan, which was drawn up by the Oklahoma Office of Juvenile Affairs, and that plan was presented to the court last week. This new punishment called for daily check-ins, weekly counseling, a curfew, no social media, and 150 hours of community service. Bam! They really brought down the hammer, huh? 150! Oh! That's like 3 weeks if you work really hard. This new plan is scheduled to stay in effect until Jesse Mack Butler turns 19. And that, my friends, is less than a year from now. So, wow, long punishment.
It's Oklahoma after all. I smell Freemasonry. How about you? Smells like Freemasons are at it again. Again, they should have thrown the book at him. He should be in jail. Simple fact that he isn't, and one of those girls has to look at a scar on her neck for the rest of her life. That's the lack of accountability that exists in our country, and that's the lack of accountability that, of course, has to change. You take someone like him, for example, be graphic, but whatever. You take somebody like him, he's now an adult, he's 18. You set up a wood chipper at the 50-yard line of that school. You convict him, and you toss his ass in. Everybody sees it and goes, whoa, what did he do? That town won't have a sexual assault for the rest of eternity. But when things like this occur, and things like this happen, and people like this get away with it, it demoralizes not just the victims and their families, it demoralizes the entire town. It demoralizes everybody. And that's on purpose because it's being done to show individuals that these Masonic lawyers and judges all work together to do just that, to remind everybody that it's the haves and the have-nots, that it's them versus us. That has to give. Something has to give in our country regarding that eventually. Now there's this. This is also, unfortunately, from the Gateway Pundit as well, but again, not unusual. It was titled, Black Principal's Race-Only Assembly Sparks Outrage at Dallas High School, claims black students must be the, quote, priority over everyone else. It says a Dallas, Texas principal has been removed from her position after Grant Stinchfield obtained an email that exposed the principal at Woodrow Wilson High School in Dallas for engaging in what can only be described as discriminatory behavior towards whites and Hispanic students. The black principal is accused of holding a black-only assembly, quote-unquote, where she allegedly told students that she was vaulting the well-being of African-American students over the others at this moment, unquote. That's according to one outraged black student who wrote an email to the school administration calling out the discriminatory meeting. Today on Stinchfield, his podcast, Grant reads the email where the student whistleblower claims his black principal even boasted about only hiring black staff. That declaration appears to be a proud admission of the discrimination. It says here, in a letter to parents on Monday morning, the DISD confirmed the principal has been replaced, telling parents the principal's actions, quote, do not reflect the values or expectations of our school community, unquote. And late Monday morning, the principal issued an apology, insisting in a letter to parents that she takes full ownership and responsibility for what occurred, unquote, and it was never her intent to single out or cause harm to any group of students, unquote. It's unclear if the principal will return or not. Again, you're not talking about the upper echelon of thinkers here. I mean, if I had a dime for every time I've witnessed similar behavior when I taught school many years ago, I'd have bags of dimes. This is exactly what they do. They do not have any kind of a filter whatsoever. There's no consequence filter. There's no common sense filter. They don't say, okay, here's what we have planned. Now, let's go around the horn with everybody here at the old conference table and see what the legal ramifications of doing this are going to be, let alone the employment ramifications. They don't do that. They don't ask those questions. They just go, yep, let's do this because it's the right thing to do. And then they just do it. Proactive, huh? Really? In the education business? You've got to be joking. Here's one last example. In fact, I'll end with this little piece of audio. This was sent to me by a listener of the show. Thank you for sending it. It's highly embarrassing, completely ridiculous. I put this on X. I put it on Gab. It's a video that this particular individual in question made themselves. Now, I have to describe this because it's difficult. This is a female Black American in the hood who was a substitute teacher apparently for at least a day inside of some school somewhere. This individual took to TikTok and recorded themselves throughout the course of the entire day. They recorded themselves interacting with students. They recorded students. And like I said, they recorded themselves talking about their day in XYZ. Again, Black female, so it kind of appears. Tattoos everywhere. Hands, neck, the whole thing. They're wearing a long sleeve shirt, not tucked in. Big baggy white pants. A giant stainless steel cross around their neck on a huge chain. They barely speak English, and this person was hired to be a substitute teacher. See if you can make heads or tails out of any of this audio here in 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. We got a new hustle unlocked. I'm a school teacher now. Little brothers. Let's get the day rolling. Who would have ever thought? Yes, ma'am. Today was really a breeze. My kids ain't have to do too much, man. I really, to be honest, I let them do whatever they want to do. Yes, I'm that type of teacher. Took me a little lunch break. Yeah, they got it going on at this joint. They stay bound. Okay, then. Damn, shorty. Sheesh. Man, I gotta get up out these school kids try to take me down, man. Then I look so young. I look like one of them. Appreciate. You know, my little free time, I had to go out there and give me some little content, little fit check. Really just a chill fit today. Cause y'all know if it was up to me, I would have been rough and head to toe. Yeah, I know I ain't lying. But they did have a pep rally and came clutch. And that was a typical day. Now y'all know my face. The substitute that got fired over at TikTok. The consistent backlash and posting, I have not only lost that job, but I've lost my main job as a DSP, direct support professional. My main job is down the drain. That is sick. I've lost not only one job, but 2 jobs to this situation. Consistent backlash is sick. Man, I'm actually a great person to have around your kids. You get what I'm saying? Great mentor. Head always been on straight. Never been a loose screw. Not let the tattoos fool you. Y'all clearly mischaracterizing me. I'm not that freaky to be sitting up talking about kids like this. I'm not an over-sexualized person. Like, I don't even do that with adults. I'm not going to do that with kids and let alone put that on my platform. Every day it's getting worse. Why are you guys constantly making this a thing if I've already got fired? I've made one mistake with teaching and I've lost everything. This is sad. I did start a GoFundMe, but I really didn't want to start a GoFundMe because I really don't want the free money. So I would just, man, if you would like to help, because I have lost everything, man.
What? What language is that? Is that Ebonics? It's not English. And of course, they weren't the only ones that made the mistake of course, filming themselves all day and showing the school off and conversations of other students looking at them and saying, man, you look like a student here. And then that woman laughing, which apparently it is a female, it's difficult to tell. But even so, they weren't the only ones that made the mistake. The school hired that person. Someone hired that person to be a substitute. It's their fault. That's a bad hire. See, real accountability in this business would be the following. You find the person who hired that person, you sit them down in an HR meeting or what have you, and you say, okay, this individual showed up and you were the one that approved this person to be a superintendent. Is that correct? And they would say yes. And then you would say, you're fired. Now, we know why they got hired. It's a DEI checkbox. We got it. Because they believe, as delusional as it is, that in order for individuals to, again, learn, in particular if you're a so-called person of color, that the only way you can do that is if another person of color, quote unquote, the terms they like to use, not me, but that those individuals are the only ones who can actually do the actual teaching, and that, of course, those students who are darker complected can only learn from those kinds of teachers. Well, case in point, you just proved that wrong yet again. It's beyond embarrassing. Again, the profession is not a profession. It's a laughing stock. It's the butt of a joke. It's a punchline. And it's going to continue to be this way until it's completely uprooted, the foundation is completely ripped out, and it's repaved with nothing but the truth. Brick by brick. It's the only way forward. Now, in the state of Ohio, this post was sent my way also, rather interesting. It says Ohio has 607 school districts. Is that excessive? And is it time to consolidate? And then the large post up top was a Facebook post from a Real Talk News Nation, Ohio Political News on Facebook. And they said, yes, Ohio must consolidate school districts from 607 down to about 100. I agree with that. I've laid it out here as to why that could happen and why that should happen, because that right there would cause these schools to become schools for the mentally handicapped and the physically disabled. It would force the schools to cater to those students and those students alone, and those students who actually believe that they are in fact within those parameters and those categories. And then the others, well, I hate to break it to them, but every now and again, if you want to kick a bird out of a nest, you have to do it, and it has to learn to fly on its own. And these students who can read and write, they can teach themselves. I continue to be shocked that they continue to wake up early and go to school. There's no reason for them to attend a brick and mortar university. It's not about making friends. It's not about making connections. You can do that in your free time, and if you learn on your own in a home environment, because you can read and write and teach yourself, the free time you'll have will be the most educational free time that those students could possibly imagine. But it just proves that the Matrix has a great deal of people in the vast majority of the attending population right around the throat. And it's terrible. But consolidating buildings does a number of things. It forces people to wake up. It forces people out of the system. It maintains the government system for the government dependent, like the handicapped. And then, of course, you only have those individuals who, of course, want to work with those kinds of students, and then you weed out the other ones. Because, of course, they don't want to participate in many cases, so they don't. But when you consolidate school buildings also, based on student population, those school districts get to save money and acquire money because they have to sell off that land and they have to sell off that property where the school currently exists that is now vacant. It's a win-win for the actual school system itself. They just don't know it because they're not business-minded people. They don't know how to run businesses. They don't understand that they have to change their business model on a constant basis with the changing economic times and with, of course, the advancement of the human brain and the tools that exist around us. They forget that schools didn't used to exist, and yet we had the Industrial Revolution. That mass schools didn't exist, and yet we built an entire nation in the 17 and 1800s. Again, what's a local school district done for a person lately? What have they done for you in a lifetime? As I've said before, the vast majority of individuals who graduate from any institution never return to said institution. They don't return to work there. They show no interest in it. They don't want to affiliate. And that's not uncommon, because that right there, just by people voting with their feet, should show people that the vast majority of the individuals who once attended the institution look back on it with all of their reflective powers and they say, what a waste. They didn't really teach me about the real world. They didn't really teach me about the profession I'm in. They didn't prepare me for anything. It was just going through the motions and sucking money out of me. And that was about it. Things have to change. There's no doubt about that. But people can change themselves by changing their mindset and changing, again, the way that they operate within their own families. And, of course, the messages that they teach one another as well, and the examples that they show one another as well. That happens all the time, too, and it happens for the better, which is a good thing. I'm going to leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening as always. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll catch you on Friday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.